The Restoration movement, for a lot of its history, had traditionally been followers of the negative regulative principle, but in the latter part of the 19th century, the group that's becoming the separate disciples of Christ tended to follow the more Lutheran approach. If it's not condemned, it's permitted, while the churches of Christ tended to follow the Zwingli approach of if it's not permitted, it is prohibited. Other important concepts within Restorationism have included the emphasis on congregational autonomy, the idea that each local congregation is separate, should be under separate elders, separate governance, and that no congregation has the right to enforce certain things on others, and then also kind of that in itself works against a denominational structure, a formal denominational structure, although we're beginning to see within the disciples, in the 20th century, and even now into the 21st century, much more of a denominational structure with at least lip service to congregational autonomy. Most congregations within the Restoration movement have tended to emphasize plural leadership. Again, the disciples in more recent years, after restructure, tended to move toward the more denominational type of approach, where the leadership is more in these kind of regional types of structures, although you still have congregational leadership at the local level. Most groups among the Restorationist churches still practice baptism. Again, the disciples will say that there's an emphasis on baptism by immersion, but they are much more open to other types of approaches. For the independent Christian churches and the churches of Christ, baptism by immersion is still very important and still emphasized as the moment in which Christ's blood is actually beginning to save a person. Most churches, of course, also continue to practice weekly communion, at least among the independent churches and the churches of Christ. There have also been some, again, changes with the disciples, but throughout a lot of the history of the American Restoration movement, the emphasis on having communion weekly, every first day of the week, has been a standard that often was distinct from other types of religious groups. So those kind of things are review. An important part of, when you look at the study guide, that final essay, a comprehensive essay, it's those kind of things, the things we've just been talking about, that I'm looking for you to describe as far as like the principles that have been emphasized within the American Restoration movement. So those I would pay attention to and be able to talk about some of those for that essay. Let's turn now to thinking about restoration as a concept, as a guiding principle for living out a Christian identity in a contemporary world. Essentially what we're talking about is sometimes referred to as Christian primitivism, the notion that the apostolic church or the primitive church is a model or a norm that should be followed and emulated in contemporary society. That's largely what a lot of people within the Restoration movement have tended to emphasize. And I don't want to give the impression that this primitivism or restorationism was necessarily something new with Alexander Campbell. We talked about in the European background section, the American background section of primitivist type of groups or restorationist groups. But even very early on, a lot of people looked at the apostolic church as a model and that the life of the apostles was something that should be emulated in contemporary settings. Now, often those groups have disagreed on what should be emulated and how it should be emulated, but there's still in the minds of a lot of people throughout Christian history the idea that apostolic activity and the churches that those apostles established are very, very important for the continuing life of the church. There's something about those first two centuries that is very, very important. It appears that the first person historically who appealed to the apostolic church as a model that should be emulated is Irenaeus, a 2nd century into 3rd century Christian thinker. And particularly Irenaeus brings it up in a context where he is attempting to refute an early Christian heresy known as Gnosticism. Now, Gnostics believed a couple of things. They tended to believe in the goodness of the spirit, but the evilness of the flesh. Right? So anything spiritual was good, anything fleshly was evil. They also tended to desire knowledge. The Greek word gnosis is a part of Gnosticism, and so this idea of searching for knowledge. But the Gnostics were particularly interested in secret knowledge, believing that Jesus had handed on to the disciples some secret knowledge that wasn't revealed in the scriptures, or what we now call the New Testament. So Irenaeus was essentially trying to work against that by appealing to the traditions, the standard of the apostolic church as what should be the standard by which Christianity is judged, meaning that Gnosticism, which had departed from the apostolic church as represented in like the book of Acts and the epistles, and even for Irenaeus, he's 2nd generation, 3rd generation Christian, so he studied with Polycarp, who was a disciple of the Apostle John. So there's still that close connection there, just a couple generations separating Irenaeus from the apostles. The monastics of the 4th and 5th century also appealed to the apostolic way of life, believing that the apostles had kind of renounced their allegiance to the world to go live these ascetic types of lives, world-renouncing lives, and so they kind of saw themselves as emulating that. But for the most part, Christian history, especially through the Middle Ages, doesn't emphasize the importance of returning to the apostolic church. Instead, for a lot of Christian thinkers, predominantly Catholics now throughout the Middle Ages, there was a way in which there was this continuity with the apostolic church. And so there wasn't as much of a concern to return to the apostolic church until you hit the Reformation. With the Reformation, one of the things that was emphasized by many of the reformers was the need to return to the apostolic church and remove so many things that throughout Christian history had been attached to the practice of Christianity. That Catholicism had invented a variety of traditions, had kind of distanced itself from the apostolic church, and so part of the reform was to return to the beliefs and practices of the apostolic church. And so it's really the Reformation that gets things going in more modern senses of this notion of restoring apostolic practice. In thinking about this idea of restoration, in Christian history, there have been essentially 4 views about Christian primitivism or Christian restoration that are reflected in different ways Christians have attempted to talk about, restoring the apostolic church. One of the ways has been what we might call an ecclesiastical restorationism. This is the one that is most reflected in the history of many of the thinkers of the American Restoration movement, the early disciples of Christ, the churches of Christ. Largely, this is the desire to restore the pattern of the New Testament church, restoring the structure, how the church operated. Other than the American Restoration movement, Zwingli and Calvin would be examples of this approach, trying to return to the practice of the apostolic church, but also, reflected in their views on what communion was, instrumental music. You see the destruction of images and relics done by these thinkers in Switzerland. This type of ecclesiastical restorationism was also very popular in England. Many of the Puritans often sought to try and restore these ideas. And so the Apostolic Church was the only model for Christianity, for both Zwingli and Calvin as well as the Puritans. Another approach to restorationism in Christian history has been what we might call ethical restorationism. Largely, this is an attempt to restore the ethical or moral power of the church, believing that one of the elements that has been lost is the power of discipleship. That the early church demonstrated a commitment to being disciples of Christ, followers of Christ, that has somehow been abandoned in the intervening years. An example of this type of approach would be the Anabaptists, who we talked briefly about when we were talking about the Reformation. Largely, the Anabaptists wanted to live that separate type of lifestyle, right? Try to refrain from being influenced by the world. They wanted to kind of bring about the end of these state churches, not only the Catholic Church as national churches, but also many of these state churches that developed in the wake of Reformation, because that kind of forced people to be part of the church instead of people being part of the church because they've chosen voluntarily to be part of the church. And so there's that concern that the Anabaptists had. Some holiness groups, Methodist groups, tended to reflect this as well, though they weren't as strictly restorationist as the Churches of Christ, the Disciples of Christ. It appears that Barton W. Stone tended to favor this type of restorationism more than the ecclesiastical restorationism, and so in respect, with Campbell and Stone, Alexander Campbell and Barton Stone, Barton Stone had some interest in ecclesiastical restorationism, but more interest in the ethical restorationism. And Campbell was the exact opposite. He had a lot of interest in ecclesiastical restorationism, but still some interest in ethical restorationism. A third approach to restorationism has been what we might call experiential restorationism. This is an emphasis on trying to recover the experience of those early decades of Christianity. The direct connection with God, the miraculous work of the Holy Spirit, prophecy. Groups that would fall into this would be like the Mormons, who believed that Joseph Smith had received direct revelations from God. Pentecostals, believing in the miraculous work of the Holy Spirit, they would tend to also fit into this experiential type of restorationism, since both groups saw themselves as restoring the apostolic church. But it's certainly not like what Alexander Campbell is doing. Finally, some scholars have suggested that there is a fourth type here, this kind of gospel restorationism. Martin Luther, for example, is pointed out as someone who would fit into this category. Luther wasn't necessarily interested in restoring the ecclesiastical structures of the early New Testament church.